Good morning. If you want to become a rabbi, am I in the right room? If you want to become a rabbi, you have to go to a learning institute called a yeshiva. Most yeshivas are in Israel, not surprisingly. And many years ago, there were a couple of young Australian boys that decided they wanted to become rabbis. So they went to a yeshiva in Israel. And at that time, it was quite unusual to have Australians there. Now, the yeshiva has the head of the yeshiva is the head rabbi, and it's a position coveted, perhaps not the right word, but great honour and respect. And so the head rabbi is kind of quite revered in each of the yeshivas. He's the authority on truth. So, when they said to him, whose authority are you speaking under? This is the same system where if you were having a debate maybe from a couple of students from different yeshivas, then they'd say, well, I'm not speaking under the authority of Rabbi so-and-so because he's the head of the yeshiva. So so this the head rabbi in this yeshiva where the Australian boys were found out there was a couple of Australian boys. And so he said, oh, well, I'd like to meet them. And so a meeting was arranged, and most of the yeshivas was there to enjoy this meeting. And so he's talking to them, and he says, teach me a nigun from Australia. Now, a nigun is a song without words. And it's a long-standing part of Jewish tradition is to do these niguns or sing these niguns. There are no niguns that have ever come out of Australia. But one of the boys, very clever, said, yes, no problem. I've got one for you. And it goes like this. Yada-dai-dai-dai, yada-dai-dai-dai. Some people know what this is, don't they? Yada-dai-dai-dai, yada-dai-dai, yada-dai-dai. So Rabbi was very impressed. Quickly learned it, and so the whole of the yeshiva is dancing around, singing and enjoying yada-dai-dai-dai, which is, of course, the tune to Play School. Why am I telling you this story? Let's have a look at the first line of Habakkuk 3, and then I'll tell you why I told you that story. Should have given the tech department some warning that it will be up pretty quickly. Whilst he's doing that, I will just read it for you because it's not a very long line. So it says, Habakkuk 3:1, a prayer of Habakkuk. Well, I should say, by the way, I checked. It is Habakkuk. It's actually Habakkuk in Hebrew, but I'm not going to make you say the ch, but it's Habakkuk, not kak or something which you heathens say. So a prayer of Habakkuk the prophet on Shigionot. Well, the English puts an H, Shigionoth. It's just plural, but in modern English, modern Hebrew, we say Shigionot. Okay, so it would have been nice you could see it, but Shigionot, right? The Hebrew does say on Shigionot, which is kind of weird. I don't know why it says not rather than a, but it does, and I haven't found an answer for that. But it's the last word. It's this Shigionot that led me to tell you the story. See, shir is Hebrew for song, and nigun, like I've just told you, is a song but without words. So Shigionot is somehow related to song and singing. So the point is, as we're heading in here, we get that this some kind of musical thing. We don't know the exact word, but it's clear it's a musical thing that has been written, they're about to head into. But let me tell you, for those of you that aren't acquainted with Habakkuk 3, this is no pretty love song that we're about to read. This is a song of lament, of war, of calamity, and of victory. So last week we heard people complaining about the evil king Jehoiakim, This week we're probably a little bit further down the track, and our focus is on the invading Babylonian king, Nebuchadnezzar. That's how you guys say it, right? Nebuchadnezzar II is actually the king that's invading. Quick background. As always, there was war in the Middle East, and this was mainly between Babylon and Egypt for control over the Middle East. So Babylon had control over what's called the Levant. So the Levant is a name for an area which these days is pretty much Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Jordan. Some also include Cyprus, which was the Phoenicians. In that, here's a map. Not. Yes. It's just refusing. It's decided it's not going to do it. God doesn't want you to see it. So turn it off, turn it on again. Probably will. Oh well, that's all right. Nebuchadnezzar was controlling the Levant, and so he was then, on his way, as you do, down to try to attack Egypt. So he went down, attacked Egypt, failed miserably, and then, tail between his legs, went back to Babylon to regroup. When that happened, all the cities in the Levant were like, he's lost, there's nothing there. So they all rebelled and stopped paying their tributes. But after the regrouping, then Nebuchadnezzar II comes back to retake control of the Levant on his way back to Egypt. So that's basically the context for Habakkuk 3. That's what was going on at the time. We can assume that at the point of this writing, he'd already taken Sidon and Tyre, which is modern-day Lebanon, right at the bottom of Lebanon, and so would have been on his way to the next major city, which is Jerusalem. And so Habakkuk was in Jerusalem, and we can assume that Habakkuk was aware. They would have known what was going on. There would have been messengers going back and forth. So that's basically the bigger context that Habakkuk would have written this prayer. Remember, it's called, in the title, A Prayer of Habakkuk the Prophet. So we'll dive in. So if you want to have a Bible, or feel free to open your phone if you've got a Bible there, your apps or whatever. Whilst you're doing that, I'm going to take my shirt off because I'm getting hot. Without exposing too much flesh. So Habakkuk 3:2. Lord, I have heard of your fame. I stand in awe of your deeds, Lord. Repeat them in our day. In our time, make them known. In wrath, remember mercy. So firstly, the deeds, he's saying, we remember your deeds of old. And we heard very similar language in the other psalm today as well. It's a common refrain. So what were these deeds of old? Well, specifically, I believe Habakkuk is thinking about the conquest of Israel of what was then Canaan by Joshua, which would have been around about 800 years beforehand. And you could say, also the deeds with the early kings as well, all that kind of going out and conquering the land. It says, Lord, I've heard of your fame. I stand in awe of your deeds, Lord. The Hebrew doesn't say stand in awe, actually. It actually says, I stand and afraid. I'm afraid because of your deeds. Yet, even in the face of fear, courageously, Habakkuk says, but God, do it again. He's recognizing that we're in trouble. He's saying, we've got trouble coming here. It's on its way. And look, you remember how you helped Joshua and his friends? Come and do that again. Help us. But that last line's interesting. Or maybe progress. The last line is, in wrath, remember mercy. So Habakkuk is recognizing here publicly that it's not deserved. Remember, mercy is undeserved. He's saying we deserve wrath. He's not saying in your wrath, go and be smiteful. He's saying in your wrath for us, because we're about to be attacked. And why is that? Because we deserve wrath. But in that, remember your mercy. So that's, again, the context that he's writing this. That's what he's asking for. And I think this is great because, well, at least for me, I think this is great because I know I deserve wrath quite a lot. And I'm understanding from this that even though I deserve wrath, it's okay to ask for mercy. I'm not the first one, and God does often genuinely, generously give mercy. And this is before Jesus. This is well before Jesus. How much more secure am I, knowing that I will receive mercy because Jesus has covered my sins. And because of my faith in him, I can really be at peace. I can really rest assured that I will receive mercy, even though I know I clearly deserve wrath. Okay, so we'll move on. So this is Habakkuk 3:3, part A, the first bit. So it says, God came from Teman, the Holy One from Mount Paran. Okay, so what? What happened? Because, we just, he'd been saying, I want mercy and help us, Lord. And then it's like, hang on, but you want a history lesson here. God came from here. It's like, well, that's a bit of a 90-degree shift. What's going on there? So God came from Teman, the Holy One from Mount Paran. Where is Teman, I hear you say? We're not sure, is the answer. It's believed to be a town in Edom, which is the region south of Judah. Edom is the word that the modern Hebrew word of drom comes for south. So God came from the south, from a town in the south, something like that, definitely from a southerly direction. But the point is that the word Taman and the city that it was from was remember, we're looking at poetry here, was associated in the ancient Near East with elegance, accomplishment, and wisdom. So that's what he's really saying. So he's just giving a compliment to God as he's saying, he's talking about God here. Now, Paran is normally referred to as a wilderness. This is another cardinal weird thing because there's no real Mount Paran. There is the wilderness of Paran, and it's certainly one of the places that the Israelites would have camped and spent a good deal of time on their journey as they escaped from Egypt and came up in the conquest of Canaan. So my best guess, is that Mount Paran is a synonym for Mount Sinai, which is the place where God met the ancient Israelites and gave them the Ten Commandments and the Law of Moses. This is a history that they know, right? He doesn't need to give them this history lesson. This is just a way of worshipping, a way of honouring God at the start of this prayer. So we'll keep reading again, Habakkuk 3:3b, the second half of that verse, and then 4. His glory covered the heavens, and his praise filled the earth. Gives a lot more context to the previous verses. Okay, we're in the midst of praise here. His splendour was like the sunrise. Rays flashed from his hand where his power was hidden. If you can see, we can't see the overheads, but if you could see it written, you can see in the Bible the way it's written as poetry. No, it's not just prose one after the other. It's line and then the next line's indented and so on. We can tell, and it would have been written in the text, the original text, as poetry. We know we're dealing with poetry here. Yeah. And this little section specifically is clearly hyperbole, which is when you exaggerate something to create an emphasis or a strong feeling. And this is really crucial to understanding this chapter, or at least the purpose of this chapter. It's poetry. We're not here for information. Poetry is not written for information. Poetry is created for emotion. It's created to move people. Many modern conservative Christians, I believe, and I would say certainly within our own brethren tradition, look to the Bible just for information. And indeed, I'd say they look to churches to go to find out about God, and to sermons, preachers, to just tell me more. We want to know more about God. That's why we're here, and it's great. It's good. It's great to want to know more about God, and it's a great aim. But it's not the whole story. The Bible itself isn't just about knowing more about God. It's about being moved. It's about emotion. And so we need to be at least open in our churches, in our services, in our sermons, in our lives, to being really moved by the Word, by the Spirit, by worship, etc. This is an important part of what it is to worship and to be a Christian. So if you think about this chapter so far, I know it's kind of hard without looking at it, but if you're thinking about what's going on here, so far does it remind you of any other sections of the Bible, or even a whole book of the Bible? Right? Psalms, of course, right? So this chapter, which is called the Song of Habakkuk, is also known as the Psalm of Habakkuk, which, of course, many psalms were meant to be sung. So it all kind of makes sense. That's the tradition of it. Okay, so I'm going to read now just through to the end of my section, which finishes at verse 16, and then I'll just talk about it a little bit. Plague went before him. Pestilence followed his steps. He stood and shook the earth. He looked and made the nations tremble. The ancient mountains crumbled. The age-old hills collapsed. But he marches forever. I saw the tents of Cushan in distress, the dwellings of Midian in anguish. Were you angry with the rivers, Lord? Was your wrath against the streams? Did you rage against the sea when you rode your horses and your chariots to victory? You uncovered your bows. You called for many arrows. You split the earth with rivers. The mountains saw you and writhed. Torrents of water swept by. The deep roared and lifted its waves on high. Sun and moon stood still in the heavens at the glint of your flying arrows, at the lightning of your flashing spears. In wrath you strode through the earth, and in anger you threshed the nations. You came out to deliver your people, to save your anointed one. You crushed the leaders of the land of wickedness. You stripped them from head to foot. With his own spear you pierced his head when his warriors stormed out to scatter us, gloating as though about to devour the wretched who were in hiding. You trampled the sea with your horses, churning the great waves. I heard, and my heart pounded. My lips quivered at the sound. Decay crept into my bones, and my legs trembled. Yet I will wait patiently for the day of calamity to come on the nations invading us. It's heavy, isn't it? It's heavy stuff. It's not pretty. We've got plagues, pestilence, trembling, crumbling mountains, bows, arrows, torrents of water, wrath and anger. And a lot of us are really uncomfortable with this. It's kind of hard to hear in our Bible. We want a sweet, loving God, don't we? We want a God who heals and mends and lifts up and brings salvation and eternal life. And God does all of that. He is all of that, and it's great. The thing is, I'm just saying, but to deny the bows and the arrows and the pestilence and the wrath, somehow is making God less than who he is. Somehow not looking at the whole person of God. It's somehow only looking at the bits that we like. And I think there's danger in only looking at the bits of God that kind of fit with us and not accepting the wholeness of who he is. We don't like talking about this in church, do we? And I mean, not just BCC. We don't like talking about it across the world. We don't talk about it in church because it doesn't fit our culture. Our culture is dominated by Hollywood and happy endings. We want peace and love. We want personal triumph. And so we're left with this notion that all God wants is for us to be successful and content, right? I mean, that's what we get That's our culture. And so God needs to fit into our idea of beauty and harmony and peace. And if not, well, there must be something wrong with God. Or perhaps maybe there's just something wrong with the Bible. Or maybe there's something wrong with the way that we, or perhaps the way that I am understanding the Bible. I could be wrong. It happened once, about 5 or 6 years ago. I think we have a bit of a misguided view about God, about ourselves, and about our place in all of this. I think that we are seeing God and our relationship to God through the lens of our cultural conditioning. And it's only natural for that to happen, of course. But just because something is natural doesn't mean it's okay. If we can recognize this conditioning, that the lens that we are seeing God through, then perhaps we can see beyond it to God's reality. And that's what we're aiming for. Now, just in case you thought it was only this Old Testament God, right? Here's that one. We don't like that God. But the New Testament God is a great God, and that's my God. Let me just show you one of what's probably the most difficult verses from the New Testament for us to accept. So this is Matthew 10. This is Jesus speaking. And Jesus said, "Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword." To which we say, "No, not my sweet, loving brother. Not our lovely, friendly Saviour." Jesus must have been smoking something weird that day. No, you know what? He wasn't. Jesus knew the Father completely, not just in part. Jesus knew that there is more to God than rainbows and butterflies and happy endings. And yes, there are rainbows and butterflies and happy endings and all of that. That's great. But more than that, maybe beyond or above that is God's ultimate will, God's righteousness, God's plan, and God's sovereignty. So, you remember at the start, Habakkuk says, God, I want you to repeat what you did in the old days. What exactly did God ask in the old days? I'm just going to show you one command that God gave to Saul, who was the first king of Israel. This comes from from 1 Samuel 15, 2-3. This is what the Lord Almighty says. "I will punish the Amalekites for what they did to us when they waylaid them as they came up from Egypt. Now, go, attack the Amalekites and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men, women, children, infants, cattle, sheep, camels, and donkeys." Ouch, right? We don't like that. We don't like that at all. If only that verse wasn't in the Bible, we'd feel much better, wouldn't we? God is commanding the Israelites to commit genocide. Are we feeling awful? Let me soften the blow a little bit, perhaps, with some maybes. Maybe all of the adults were evil. Maybe the animals were full of disease. Maybe the children were still innocent, and by letting them grow, they would have turned into evil. And so by taking their lives before they reached the age of responsibility, they could be kept pure so they could actually be accepted with God in heaven. Maybe Jesus preached to them in Sheol and they all repented. And so their earthly punishment maybe led to eventual salvation. Are we feeling a little bit better? Maybe a little better about all that? Maybe. You know, none of these maybes are particularly Bible-based. The bottom line is we don't have the mind of God. It's not our call, what God chooses. Both in the New Testament, in Romans, and in the Old Testament, in Exodus, God says he will have mercy on whom he chooses to have mercy. The implication being, he will not show mercy to whom he chooses not to show mercy to. But it's his choice. And it's important that we do see that this is New Testament and Old Testament. Because there is one Bible The Old Testament isn't wrong. God didn't suddenly change. There's one God. Look, it's absolutely true that the New Testament is far more focused on love and forgiveness. And it's like, well, no surprise. The New Testament's about Jesus. So of course it would be. But to truly understand God, we need to be aware of the whole character of God and not just the bits that we like. So, what do we take away from this? Do we take away that we should go and destroy evil people and things? Well, I'd say, best to exercise some caution when it comes to that. There's no record of God asking any prophet to go and kill people in the last 2,000 years. And indeed, Jesus' coming does seem to have changed things. It seems to have ushered in a new system for the interaction between God and humanity. Jesus brings humanity to, I think, what can be seen as a new level of maturity. Habakkuk prayed for God to avenge his foes, but Jesus said, forgive them, even pray for your enemies. It's a seismic change, a seismic growth in human nature, in the maturation of human nature that's required to move from God, just look after us and smite them, to God, I know they're attacking us, but look after them and help them. What a change through Jesus. Now, if you look back at the final line of Habakkuk, Old Testament, he says, I have resolved to wait patiently. So that's something. As much as he said, God, I want you to do all this, he isn't saying, well, we're going to go out and do all this. He's saying, I will wait patiently for you to act, God. So in many ways, from the context of just looking at the Habakkuk story, this story of really wrath and violence is actually quite similar to last week's message. Last week we learned to run and tell everyone that God sees what's going on, and so you can be at rest, so that you can be peaceful. And it's really similar advice this week. Wait patiently for God to do what God's going to do, for God to show mercy to whom he's going to show mercy, and to not show mercy who he chooses not to. So that's the message, is to leave revenge, leave justice to God, and indeed pray to God, not just to make things right, but to make things right for the enemies. You see, if you think about it, someone that's got an improved life, that's got a good life, someone that's got a joyful life, they're far less likely to harm others than people that are actually struggling with anger or pride and so on. It's a clever prayer, isn't it, to pray for others? So whilst I do indeed hope you know a little bit more about God than when you first sat down, I hope more than just knowing a bit more that you are somehow moved, that you are somehow changed, that you are somehow feeling different about God, about the world, about the nature of things, about your place in the world. And I hope the Spirit of God has moved within you to bring you more into alignment with himself. So with that in mind, let me pray. Thank you, Lord, for your mercy, even though we know we deserve wrath. And Lord, thank you for your word. Thank you for giving us insight into your character so that we can better form our characters. And Lord, I ask that your Spirit testifies directly to our spirits so that we may feel the way that you feel and that we may want the things that you want. And Lord, thank you so much that we can rely on you. We can easily access your peace, knowing that you have everything under control and that we need to just wait patiently for you. In Jesus' name, amen. Questions, comments, fruit throwing? Everyone's blown.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks, Jonathan. It seemed to me that in many ways what you were saying was quite political, and we are somewhat afraid of praying politically and speaking politically in church. Do you have an opinion on that, please?
I've tried really hard to not say anything politically. So unless I get the right question, I won't.
I want to thank you for your insight into that. I think it was really good. And it's as you say, it's a difficult passage. But I love what you did with that, and that particularly about the moving of it. I mean, we could just read it as facts and go, yeah, that's great. But I think, there's something about that prayer and that song. I love the introduction to about the play school. That just gave it some real context. So there, the fact that this is actually a song, which is a tug at the heartstrings, and I think it's really encouraging for us to be able to unpack some of that rather than it just being a fact.
Mm. Kind of makes me think of, we were talking before about God moments, or what I'd call a God incident. It was, what am I going to do this week? Was I going to do next week? And then it worked out for me to do this one. And it was probably good that I ended up doing this one because I had extra insights. And I read it through first, and I'm like, phew, I don't know what's there, right? Right, yeah, right. You're the one that wimped out of this one too. And I'm like, oh, I don't know, how am I going to do this? And then, so just, with no ending or clear landing inside, I just headed in, and often do. And then that way I feel like God leads me. And then I get to the end and I'm like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. Oh no, can I go there? Am I going to be in trouble? And yes, but luckily you don't bring fruit with you. Rotten tomatoes. Oh, you have? Yeah, good.
These historical songs, the one that Habakkuk sung, do they remain? Have you heard the music of these songs today?
So the Psalms, and none of the biblical tunes have remained. So we don't know the tunes. And whether the current songs, how reflective they are they reflective of 200 or 300-year-old Middle Eastern culture, or some of it could be European culture? We don't know. Yeah, but we don't have any of the original tunes. Interesting. The Torah is written with notes. So the Torah we know is the same tune, but it's only the Torah. So the rest of it doesn't have. There's no notes there yet. Afraid to leave.